All right, I think we're live. So, yeah, we can go ahead, man, and discuss it. So, just to be clear, because I don't want to, I want to make sure we understand the topic again, just for everybody who's listening in. Um, so basically, we're talking about Descartes and the Cogito, right?
Hmm.
And how we arrive at it, whether through reason or through direct experience. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm willing to expand the idea from the cogito as it's normally phrased to include, the kind of things that you guys prefer, which is there's an experience happening. So
Right,
the
right.
cogito is specifically, I mean, it's clearly reasoning. I think, therefore I am. The therefore is indicating a conclusion that follows from what comes before. So the cogito is
Correct.
definitely reasoning. I don't think we could. I mean, are you willing to concede that?
Yeah, but Descartes also said that thinking is so evident that it can't be doubted. So, in other words, it seems to me that it's not a logical conclusion from thinking. It's like an immediate intuition. Like the moment you see that you're thinking, you already know you exist. So there's no real gap between premise and conclusion there. So the act of thinking itself sort of reveals existence. So maybe properly saying it would say, I think, therefore I am, is not a reasoning from a premise to a conclusion, but the direct recognition that thinking presupposes being. Would you agree with that?
Well, the idea that thinking presupposes being also seems like a reasonable conclusion based in reasoning. One thing I wanted to clear up right from the get-go, and I don't know whether anybody else is listening to this, but I know you understand this, but I'm not calling into question whether or not reasoning is reliable.
Right,
I
right. Yeah,
believe that
yeah, that.
reasoning is reliable. Hmm. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
what we're talking about is whether that confidence that we have in reasoning ought to be considered absolute or less than absolute. And so whether or not any conclusions that we have, and I would say anything that you believe, whether or not it is based in reasoning, in which case it's only going to be as certain as you believe reasoning is, or whether there's some other way for you to base uh, something that you believe. Because I think you would say that you believe it. When you say you know it, you're talking about something that you believe very strongly. And so what I'm wondering is if it's not
Oh,
based on
man.
reasoning, what is it?
Hmm.
And you're saying it's based on experience, immediate, that there is no like, let me think about this and reach a conclusion.
Hmm. Unfortunately, my setup is going in and out, so I kind of missed what you just
Oh,
said.
okay.
Can you restate that one more time now that I'm back?
Hmm. Um, I think to try to backtrack, I was speculating that you are saying that you have a belief, and that is that you eh, you are having experience or awareness or whatever it is, but you're saying the belief isn't based on reason. And so I'm asking you, what is that belief based on, if not reason?
Can you define belief in that context? I want to make sure I understand what you mean there.
It's just something you accept as true or likely true.
Um, See, it's kind of a weird thing to say I believe I'm conscious because belief for me. So when I usually talk about beliefs, I'm usually talking about people who or a mental state, like it's a
Yeah.
conclusion, like it's kind of like I believe in God. I don't know there's a God, but I believe in God. You see the difference? Like, I don't have to believe that I'm, if I have a headache or a toothache or something like that, that's not a matter of belief. That's a matter of firsthand experience, which is a form of what you call experiential knowledge. So it's a knowing, but it's a certain kind of knowing, if that makes sense.
Okay. So for me, I'm just not using belief in that way. I'm
Okay.
using belief in the sense that it encompasses that kind of knowledge that you're talking about. They're all things that we come to think are true. If you were to say, well, this I know and this I believe, in both cases, both of those statements, no matter what the differences are between those terms, the thing they have in common is you would be saying, I think this is true.
Mm-hmm. I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Um,
So I'm talking about things we think are true. When I say things we think are true can be based in reasons, we can have reasons to think something is true. And you're saying when it comes to thinking that it's true, that experience exists or experience is happening, you seem to be trying to say, no, it's not based on reasoning, it's something else. And so I'm
yeah, it's
saying,
deeper.
how
Yeah.
else,
Hmm.
yeah, how else do you get to the idea that something is true without reasons?
Because there's different ways to approach reasoning. Like, language is an engagement in reasoning, right? So whenever I'm trying to explain an experience, I use language. It's all we've got as a tool. But the nature of language is it's a reasoning tool as well. So it's real easy to kind of get confused on that particular because you know if I was to say, I think it's true that I exist is kind of incoherent in a way because it's sort of like putting the cart before the horse. I was saying earlier, like it's like the prerequisite of all thinking and all reasoning is being conscious or having an experience of it. So the way I'm looking at it or the way I'm approaching it, and it may be just a linguistic confusion, but the way I'm approaching it is to say that reason exists inside of experience rather than the other way around. So I couldn't think of anything unless, of course, I existed to begin with. And the
Yeah,
way I know
yeah.
that I exist is through direct experience. So it's like the prerequisite.
Hmm. So the idea that it's the prerequisite is something that I want to agree with, and then I want to ask you to justify for me anyway. Go ahead and tell me, how do you know that something like that is the prerequisite? You said to think that you exist,
Through
that
experience,
your existence
and
is a
I
prerequisite
think
for you
I
thinking
keep
that you
disconnecting.
exist. And so I'm agreeing with you about that, but then I'm saying, can you express
Yeah. So
that? What makes that a prerequisite?
because if I wasn't conscious, like if I wasn't aware, if I had no awareness, then I couldn't make any statements.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have anything to describe. I would have to
Mm.
have something that I'm describing in those words. So the words are based on, they emerge out of something more fundamental. And that fundamental thing, of course, is our experience. And, I think that, you know, arguing for, of course, requires reason. And so it can be confusing sometimes to folks who may not understand that particular concept in that way. And so they'll say, well, you're just reasoning yourself into the statement that I exist. but you have to
Sorry.
reason about it. You have to think about it before it's really true, right?
Well, let me
Truth
bump in.
is also an emergent property out of statements, you know.
Sorry. They, I was asking you to express the you said it's a prerequisite, and I said I agree with you. And then I was just asking you to express how you can know that it is a prerequisite. And I think what you gave me was a because and then a reason. Is
Hmm.
that fair? You went on to talk about some other things, but I don't want to lose track of what we are trying to chase down here, which is what are you, when you can say that you know something, can you
Hmm.
do it without appealing to reason? My feeling is that you
Um,
can't. You haven't done that when you say, well, thinking that I exist, seems to require that I exist. And I agree with that, that it does, but that is reasoning, right? So if that's the basis for saying, hey, we can know, then reasoning is the basis
hmm.
that we can know.
Yeah, because yeah, the challenge though is that it seems like what I would be trying to do then is convey, um, if you ask me for a reason, then I would have to engage in reasoning. So, but to myself, subjectively, those things don't require any sort of argumentation, right? So, like, thought is the content and awareness is the context, you know? So, before a thought can really be known, there must already be a knowing. Awareness doesn't come from thought, thought is known by awareness. So it's kind of, in order to really talk about it, is sort of ineffable. It goes back to the problem of ineffability, like we were talking about earlier, that because we're already engaging in reason once we convey these ideas to a third party. That's the whole problem. That almost gets into the hard problem of consciousness, that you can't really know consciousness from an intellectual point of view or a third party point of view. Approaching it that way creates a hard problem, a dilemma. Um,
Yeah, but
and this
but we
this has
can
been going on
certainly
for
reason.
thousands of years. And so,
We can
but one
certainly
thing we do
communicate and
know is we
reason to
do
each
have a
other.
subjective experience.
Sorry, that was breaking up for me.
Reason backwards, you mean?
No, a lot of what you said was breaking up. And then I started talking, so I didn't hear what you said.
Um, Hold on a second because I'm still it's all on my end. I'm missing everything you're saying. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to come out and come back in, and that way
Hmm.
it might clear that problem up because I'm missing you.
Should
Hold
I
on
go
one
out and come
second.
back
I'm
in
gonna come
too?
out and come back. Oh yeah, try to do the same if you will.
Okay, I will. All right, Scott.
Okay, hopefully this clears things up a little bit. We'll see how it goes. hopefully, because just to kind of let everybody know, I have to really upgrade my computer and my internet, and all this stuff is just kind of gone to crap. So yeah, I might take my image off of here. That's a good idea. Yeah, that
Yeah, if
might
it
help.
helps.
Yeah, I think that might help. Cool. All right, so go ahead and make your statement. I missed the entirety of it, if you can remember it.
Well, shoot, last thing I remember, you were talking, and I was having trouble, you know,
Ah, okay,
catching everything you were saying. Um,
gotcha.
so, but one thing I did think I picked up on. You tell me if I'm getting it.
Uh huh.
You're saying you think the real issue is in our language and in our ability to express how we get to thinking that something is true, that doesn't involve reasoning. That as soon as we try to express it to the other person, it looks like reasoning, it comes across like reasoning. Or maybe
Yes,
that reasoning is the only way we seem to be able to communicate to others. Um,
correct.
and I, I'm willing to concede that, but then I'm going to just kind of have to say, now, aren't you just, you're really making it explicit that this belief can't be rational?
Yeah, in a way, it's not a rational thing. It's more of what you call a self-evident awareness, which is a little different than reasoning. Like, I think, therefore I am, or I experience, therefore I am, looks like reasoning, right? But even Descartes says, in the true sense, that it's just self-evident awareness, not an argument supported by a reason. Is kind of the foundation of reason. That was the whole thing. Um, Something being self-evident um, can lead into that sort of statement that we talk about, but then the statement appears to be like I'm engaging in reason because it's the only tool that we have. You know what I mean? Our language.
Okay, okay. So is this kind of an exclusive area where this is the case? Or would you
Yes,
say there are other areas where you could say,
correct.
hey, here's something that is self-evident and there's really no reasoning involved. You just kind of, you know it's true and you didn't need reasoning to get there.
Possibly logic is entailed. So, like the
You
laws
don't think
of
logic
thought.
is within reason?
I'm saying the foundation of logic. The laws of thought. You know, like the three laws of thought.
Okay. Yeah.
Those kind of, and I'll break that down because that I understand where you're going to go with that one. So the problem is that seems like a kind of contradictory. But the thing is that I can't, exist and not exist at the same time and in the same place. Is the intuition. That's the direct, sort of self-evident sort of fact of the matter, right? And so that's what you like. That's what you call, and I may be wrong on that, but that's where I think it fall. I think that's the only other thing that I could possibly say falls into that same special category that we're defining here. And I may be wrong. I may be
Can you
totally
repeat the
wrong
thing?
about that. Yeah, so as it is, to be clear, so as it is, the only other thing I could imagine could fall into the same category as I experience, therefore I am, as not a reasonable conclusion, but the foundation of reason would also be the laws of logic. It seems like the
Okay.
reasoning should be based on the laws of logic, but I may be wrong
Okay.
about that.
But
I may be wrong about that.
but then it really seems like you're talking about axiomatic thought, where you kind of go, well, we need some basis here, and we recognize that, the further down we get towards the foundation of our epistemic structures, the more we just have to assert axioms you know, um, in order to build those structures and keep those structures from collapsing. Um, but again, we don't say about our axioms, we're so certain about these things we couldn't possibly be wrong. And that's the kind of level of certainty that we're calling into question. in
Yeah.
disagreement with you and me, is I'm saying, no, it doesn't deserve that high level of certainty. And you seem to be saying, well, we're just kind of asserting it like we do the foundations of thought.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is that like the one thing I'm sure can't be doubted is the self-evident fact of the matter of be having an experience, being conscious. That part I'm
Hmm.
very certain falls into that. Now that may be the only way, only special case, but it seems to me, and maybe this is just a product of reasoning, that the laws of logic follow from that. Um, Deeply connected, because and that might be a limitation because I cannot imagine a world where the
Yeah.
laws of logic don't apply to
Yeah.
truth, right?
Yes.
Or any truth statement. So because I can't
Yeah.
imagine it is probably why I sort of smuggle that in there along with the cogito. But
Hmm. Well, there's a couple things I wanted to point out is, even though you're saying, well, this is similarly self-evident, you're also saying, but it's not as certain as I am about the cogito. So I wonder why, if that immediate awareness that kind of can't be called into question and doesn't even need to appeal to reasoning or anything else is good enough for your existence, or your awareness, then why isn't it good enough for the laws of logic? Now that I hate to ask a question like that and then follow up with another one. Uh, Let me hold on. I'll try to hold on to the next thought. Do you have something there?
okay, repeat that in another way because I'm not sure how to answer.
Oh, okay. You had said that the reason that the Cogito deserves this high level, almost absolute level of certainty is because it isn't really relying on or based on reasoning or anything else that we would have to kind of say, well, we're not really sure about that either. Um, and instead, it's because of this immediate awareness that we have with
Hmm.
it, this kind of direct experience that kind of can't be called into question. And I was saying, well, let's have another example of something else that's like that. And your
Hmm.
example was the laws of logic. But then you seem to say that you're less certain about the laws of logic than you are about the cogito. And so I'm saying, if they're based in the same kind of like, hey, direct experience thing, then why does one get the higher level of certainty than the other?
Um, so it's a very sophisticated question. So um, like going back to Descartes, cogito shows one thing with absolute certainty: the very act of thinking proves that something exists, namely the awareness. So the insight is sort of immediate, not inferred. It's not reached by applying logic to premises, but by sort of just, recognizing that doubting or thinking already presupposes existence, and the existence through the awareness. Um, so it doesn't derive logic from, so the cogito doesn't derive logic from experience. Rather, logic is already operating in the act of recognizing the cogito. So to
Yeah,
see
that's what
that,
I'm
I
saying
think
is
there,
you can't even do the cogito without assuming that logic is true. You have
right?
to
So the
you have to assume logic is true in order to conclude the cogito, and that's what I'm saying. That's reasoning.
yeah, that's what I'm saying is that some
Because
the
here's the
tension
thing,
there.
if
So
the laws of logic don't hold, then I think therefore I am doesn't hold.
well, the cogito and
It
the laws of logic
relies.
they sort of stand together though at the foundation of rational awareness. So neither of those is grounded in the other. Both are grounded in the fact of consciousness, right?
um I, no, I that's exactly what I'm saying is that I don't think that any of them uh get we don't get to either one of them without using reasoning to get there. That's how I view beliefs. Personally, I don't have this experience of of having things I believe and then going, I don't even think I have a reason for that. I think I just, boom, um, I knew it was true.
Mm. So you're saying
Normally,
it's kind of like a relational thing.
yeah, reasons are what push us
Okay. Well,
to
you
believe.
know,
That's what makes us believe something, whether the thing is true or false or whatever. Something happened that made you believe it, and that thing can be expressed as a reason, and it stands as a reasonable justification for you. But when you kind of say, well, no, there is no reasonable justification, you're either kind of
but
admitting
you know how
that you're
presuppositions
asserting.
work.
Sorry, go ahead.
But you do know, like with presuppositions, also don't really require um, justifications like that. So for example,
Yeah, but what do you
like
feel about presuppositionalism? You feel like it's a good way to do epistemology?
it can be inescapable sometimes,
Well,
because
that's what
like
we call axioms. That's what we say is like, yes, everybody kind of has to put something at the basis of their structure. Sometimes we call that basic beliefs. I think basic beliefs are fair game for reasonable thought. But when you declare that a belief is basic in the sense that, and that means that it is the base and it doesn't have anything, you know, as a basis for it, you are conceding that it's not a rational belief, it's an assertion that needs to go there in order to hold the structure that sits on
right,
top of it.
but awareness is not a presupposition though; it's foundational.
Yeah, every basic belief is foundational.
Well,
That's what
awareness
it
is
means
the
to say it, that it's basic, is that it makes up the base of the structure of everything that you believe is true. You have basic beliefs at the bottom of that structure,
would you agree that
foundational beliefs.
presuppositions should be based on a foundation, or should they just kind of be standalone? What is your thought on that?
I think that if you're talking about the way that I hear most often Christian apologists use that word, then they are talking about things that they just assert and assume are true, and they will stick to it. If you kind of try to say, how do you know it's true? Then they will say
God.
that well, either that God kind of makes them able to know that it's true,
Right,
or
right.
they
And
will
that's
say,
that's
hey,
that's the problem.
everybody has these kinds of beliefs at the bottom of their structure. You have them too. Mine just happens to be that there's a God. That's the two ways I've heard
That's
that go.
yeah, but that's very disconnected because
It is for me
for,
too, Scott. That's what I'm saying is I don't
right,
buy
right,
that kind
right.
of bullshit, right? And
So
so,
we can agree. If we can
yeah,
agree on that,
we can agree.
then
So let's agree. When it comes to our basic beliefs, the most foundational things that we think and accept are true, those things are not things that we can be absolutely certain about because we don't even have reasons to back them up. We just kind of stick them in there because they make the structure stand up.
but for me, it just seems very disingenuous to deny or to concede that awareness is just a belief. There's something about that that doesn't
I
resonate
didn't
with
say
me,
just a belief, right? When you say
or an
just a belief, you
axiom,
mean
or are you saying
maybe
awareness
you
is the
believe it but
axiom?
you don't know it or something, and I don't mean that. I know I exist, right?
Hmm.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
I
okay.
know I
Maybe we're
exist.
yeah, we're
Yeah,
so
I
I
know
think
I
we're
exist, just like I know that reason is reasonable and
right.
reliable, right? I have high levels of certainty in those things. I just don't think
Hmm.
absolute certainty is warranted anywhere, even those things, right?
That's I'm just not sure how you, because even that requires reason, even that
Yeah, it
conclusion.
does. But I think reason is reasonable. And so I can reasonably go with conclusions that I come up with, right?
Hmm.
Here's the thing.
Maybe
If
you're
I
thinking
said,
too much on this.
here's the thing, Scott. If I said, hey, I reasoned to that
Uh-huh.
and now I'm absolutely certain of it, you would say, well, hold on, didn't you say that you're not absolutely certain about anything, even reasoning? And so you can't reason to something and then claim to be absolutely certain of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to say,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's right. Because that's the point I'm trying to make with you is once you recognize that you reason to a conclusion and you recognize that reason is reliable is something that you have less than absolute certainty in saying,
So
then
let's see where
anything
we
that you
agree
reason
on.
to has to be couched within that. It has to be only
So
as certain as you are about reasoning.
right. So let's see where if we could agree on another thing. Um, the reason why reasoning is not certain, you can't be certain about reasoning. I think we both can agree on that, right? That rationality is not um, absolutely reliable. Would you say that?
Yeah, that our certainty should be less than absolute in it. Yeah.
Okay. And the reason for that, or the reason that you're coming to that conclusion, it would be what? Let's see if we agree. Because you can be maybe wrong about your reasoning, or you can your reasoning can be misleading somehow. That's kind of by definition what
Hmm.
unreliability
Are
would
you,
kind of mean, right?
um, are you asking if what it would be like if reason was in fact not reliable? Like, what would that be like?
Yeah, like well, what's your reason is what is your reasons for saying that reasons are not reliable?
Well, I think it's continued reliability in the fact that we reason towards, best courses of action, and then we kind of see what happens. And sometimes we say, well, that wasn't the right decision, but we usually can look back and see reasons that go with that. So
Hmm.
reason is one of those basic beliefs that is it's going to. Oh wait. Um, Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the kind of giving the justifications of thinking that reason is reasonable is going to appeal to reasoning to do it. It's going to
Circular.
say it seems reliable when we do good reasoning. It seems reliable, like it's working.
Hmm.
But of course, if reasoning wasn't reliable, we might be sitting here just doing stuff and not being able to tell that we're making all these mistakes.
Hmm.
But this is a little like questioning cause and effect. It would be like, well, it sure looks like cause and effect is everywhere, but what would it be like if we were wrong and we were just assuming cause and effect everywhere we look? It would be impossible for us to tell is the
Hmm.
answer, I think, unfortunately.
But in this in the and but in the light of reason itself, we know that that's unreliable. We
Connected.
know that reason is unreliable because you can do reasoning wrong, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. As in terms of user error, it's not reliable. No.
Right,
But in
right,
terms of
right.
being it's like a tape measure, right? Like a tape,
Hmm.
we could look at a tape measure and be like, is this a reliable tape measure? Well, sure, it depends on who's using it, um, at whether or not we're going to get reliable measurements out of it. But it's not the tool's fault when it's the user error. So I would
Correct.
I would say that's the way that works with reasoning. Yeah,
Can do
people
it wrong.
appeal to
Yeah.
fallacies.
Right, right.
We love
Perfect,
them.
perfect. Exactly. So the next question, can you do awareness wrong in the same way? Can you be aware of things wrong? Like, can you be aware that you're aware wrongly? Like, can you be
No,
mistaken
no,
that
it
you're
wouldn't be.
aware of your existence?
No, no, that wouldn't be the way that's not the problem. Mm-mm.
So, yeah, so you couldn't, so being aware, you can't really do that in a way that can mislead you that you're really not aware. I think I'm aware, but I could be wrong. It's unreliable. I could be wrong that I'm aware.
Well, how about when you tell someone to watch something or keep an eye on it, and they think they are, and then their awareness really has drifted off. And so obviously you could, if we're talking about does is a, you know, they're them being aware is going to be the case regardless. But what we're aware of is kind of a, it could, it can involve user error.
Right, but that's sort of a different thing. Like I can take massive amounts of acid or drugs and it will, or just get drunk or go
Mm-hmm.
through brain damage, and in my experience will change, right? And it can really be like a delusion, right? But in
Mm-hmm.
order to have a delusion or an illusion, I have to be aware. The prerequisite is always still a basic awareness, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is all that I'm really saying, is that awareness is that foundation that never changes in and of itself. Now, the contents
Mm-hmm.
can change, but the
Mm-hmm.
awareness of those contents
Mm-hmm.
never changes. It's sort of
Mm-hmm.
it's static. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really it's sort of just there. That
Yeah.
awareness
Yeah.
is always just there. Whereas like with
Until it's
reasoning,
not. Sure.
yeah, until it was snuffed out somehow or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
But
mean, and Scott,
mhm,
I mean, I agree with all that. And, you know, I hate to do this to you, but I'm just going to have to say that's some good reasoning that you're giving me. If it's true and it's
mhm,
reliable, then we can be very confident that we exist and, or that, you know, that awareness is happening or however you want to phrase that. Right.
mhm,
But
mhm.
if the reasoning that you're using there isn't good, if it was bad, whether that was user error or just shit, reasoning doesn't really work the way we thought it did. It's just part of an illusion that's happening. Then the reasoning wouldn't be good. It wouldn't necessarily mean, therefore, awareness is not happening, but it would mean that we would be wrong in thinking that we had come across something that we could know for sure.
Yeah, it for me that kind of goes into the problem of explaining. Like to explain something is to use reasoning or language to make sense
Mm-hmm.
of it. So to
Yes, cause
show
and effect.
how, yeah, so how or why it's true. So whenever we explain awareness as foundational, yeah, we have to use reason because we're building a conceptual argument. But the content of that reasoning, the awareness itself, is really not something known through reasoning. It's something reasoning depends on. So I still am kind of stuck
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
That's
no,
that's the problem.
I agree with you that reasoning, like us being able to reason, depends on that existence of ourselves or the awareness that has that experience. Um, that is true, right? That's
Hmm.
good sound reasoning that we're using to
Yep.
figure out that it's true.
Yeah. 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 I,
Yeah,
I get that part. Yeah. I
we
do
both
get that
believe that
part.
reasoning is reliable, and so we're going to say those are good conclusions. But if we say, well, but how certain are we about reasoning? Are we absolutely certain about reasoning?
Hmm.
Are,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Like
don't know. Are you are you absolutely certain about reasoning?
no, I'm not certain about reasoning. No, I'm
Okay,
certain
but so
about
then do you?
I'm
But
certain
so how
about the
about this?
primary.
Do you agree in that case that if you're not absolutely certain about reasoning, then anything that you reason towards is going to be only as certain as you are for reasoning. So if it's less than absolute, then the conclusion needs to be less than absolute.
Well, I think awareness is kind of beyond language and reason. That's like I said, that's the special case. So like reasoning
Yeah.
is like a map. Awareness is the territory in which both the map and the map maker exist. So you can draw a map of awareness, but the existence of that map isn't proven by the map. It's what makes map making possible at all. So when we reason about awareness, we're just using the tools of thought to point back to the field in which the thought arises. Does that make sense?
Um,
I mean, it sounds very
Some of it,
reasonable.
some of it more than others, but I mean, I did hear you start by saying this is a special case, and it
Yeah,
can be
yeah,
pretty tough to argue against people making special cases for things.
yeah.
And
I know. That's the
yeah,
problem with conveying a concept like idealism or something like this non-duality, because the
and it's the
words
problem
it's
with
ineffable.
consciousness itself, because what is
Hmm.
like it? What it is
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
a, it does seem to be a special case, whatever's going on. But that's kind of why when people go, well, there's this hard problem, and I just can't imagine that you could get something like consciousness from, but it's like, well, unless it's a special case, you know what I'm saying? And you sure do think it
Yeah,
is. We sure do acknowledge that it has to be, whatever's going on, it has to be a special case. So,
hmm,
the idea that it's a natural special case, to me, is just a step more reasonable than the idea that it's anything supernatural. Now, I know you'd probably say, well, my thing is not supernatural, but to me, it does kind of feel that way, because it feels like you're kind of putting that same thing behind reality that theists do when they put God behind it. It
I
serves as the
know.
explanation.
I get it.
Hmm.
I get it, man. Do I
Hmm.
get it? Because a lot of the rejection of these sort of non-dual sort of monisms and stuff,
Hmm.
monistic kind of um ideas and concepts, they do sound like religion, because I think they're really saying, I think that they're sort of saying, I mean, my opinion is that they're sort of saying the same thing in different language, but, not always, with everybody, of course, but the way I see it is that there is this something, there is this greaterness, even under other models, like you could say physicalism, materialism, as we talk about, those also sort of, assume some sort of primacy of matter or primacy of the things you observe in the world. Like they'll observe this thing in the world and say, ah, that explains the way I'm able to observe it. Like, this thing out here, this brain that I see in my awareness explains my awareness of seeing the brain, which is totally circular. So it always ends up with some sort of circularity. And I think that's kind of, I mean, we can reason that that's maybe a limitation of the human mind, you know, but we can't really deny that we do have this direct sort of knowing beyond just thought. I mean, the pure awareness is realized, it's not really reasoned to, and then everybody agrees, but then everybody disagrees, and because they want to sort of reject some kind of supernatural sounding kind of claim. And I think a lot of this has to do with our language, which is a product of culture. And there could be a lot of other factors involved in that.
Hmm.
But that's why I
Well,
just
one
want
thing
to,
I always,
I just wanted to have you on to really kind of talk about it. Like, mhm,
yeah, yeah, man, I
go right
appreciate it,
ahead.
because we had definitely gone a little back and forth in the comments, but that can get a little, that can start to be a lot of work compared to just trying to hash it out. Um, Really, I think
Yeah.
we are mostly in agreement about these things. It does seem a little bit like you're saying that, when it comes to the way, part of the reason it seems that you're saying you feel absolutely certain in this one particular conclusion is because you think the way that you know it is also kind of special and one of a kind as well. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, if
yeah.
I understand you right,
Yeah.
I would just
And
say
then
that,
we agreed, yeah, and then we agreed that yeah, it is special. Whatever's going on with it, it sure is.
mm-hmm,
So I
mm-hmm,
I do
right.
think we've really kind of realized that we're not looking at this too differently in any kind of way.
Mm-hmm,
I think the main hang up is that I still think when you have even that most direct experience that you are something having an experience, or you're having an experience, whatever it is, that that is still something that you have to kind of, you don't have to stop and think about it, just like we
mm-hmm,
don't have to write out a syllogism every time we think about how to do something using reason. A lot of those things just happen really quickly in our minds, like in microseconds, right? Because that's what survival in nature required. And so this idea of like, well, I saw the thing and I didn't stop and say, well, I see it is the first premise, and when I see something, I think it exists, or I think it's out there, and therefore it's out there. We don't stop and do that. And I think you're right, we don't stop and do that when it comes to that pure awareness or pure existence of consciousness or whatever. But it still is something that has to be couched in reason. It has to be a reasonable thing, that experiencing something means it entails an experiencer, or that experience is happening. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And that's
It's
logical
kind of like the
entailment,
hard
and
problem
that's
of
reasoning.
solipsism. Like it kind of goes back to the hard problem of solipsism. You know that we can't really get past that that I'm aware of. And it, but most people don't. Most people don't want to live solipsistically just for practical reasons. Of course, you hardly know. It's probably hardly any solipsists. I don't know any, but I'm sure there are. But the reason most people want to move past solipsism because it gets you nowhere, and so the next best thing is just to try to be just as simple as you can when
Hmm.
approaching these sort of topics, because you don't want to add all these different beliefs into it that themselves need explanations. But
Hmm.
we can at least we can at least acknowledge solipsism for what it is. We can at least acknowledge the ideas that all we really know is the experience we're having. From that, we derive all kinds of inferences, and
Yeah.
we derive all kinds of syllogisms to explain it, or things to explain a host of other things. But yeah, that's the hard problem of solipsism. And until we can solve that, we're kind of be stuck in this epistemic loop here in this conversation. So really,
Yeah.
the best
Well, I
thing we
love
can
that
do,
comparison. I love that comparison, and real
yeah.
quick, I just want to draw out why. One is that
And it's like
solipsism
the
is
best
something.
thing we can do is just kind of talk about it and mhm,
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
yep,
I just wanted to
go right
to
ahead.
point out a couple things. Yes, it is an apt comparison when you say to solipsism. Here's the things that I think are worth noting is that with solipsism, what we kind of say about it is, well, we can't ever really rule it out. We can't say that we know for absolute certainty it's not true, right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
We kind of have
mhm,
to express that, like, no matter how certain we become of the idea that there is an external world with other minds to interact with, we cannot claim to be absolutely certain of that, because we can't say that we've ruled out the idea that somehow our own minds are creating it all,
mhm.
right? And so it's so much like this thing that I'm saying about the reliability of reason and the existence of the self, or the truth of the cogito, is, yes, we can say that we're fairly certain, but we can't say we're absolutely certain, right?
Yeah, even a solipsist would say they're certain that they're having experience. I mean, that's the foundation of solipsism.
Yeah, yeah. But that's the thing, is, does it go for a solipsist? They say, well, can that's the thing I'm certain of, and nothing else rises to that level, and so I'm not convinced of anything beyond myself, right?
Hmm. 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 Right.
And I'm kind of
That's the
saying,
foundation problem.
yeah, and I'm kind of saying, just like we say, well, we can't rule out solipsism, but we're also not going to accept it as true. We also say we can't rule out that reason isn't reliable.
Oh, you do know I'm a
So we're going to,
solipsist though too, right?
nah, you already said you weren't.
No, not an ontological solipsist. I'm an epistemic solipsist.
Okay, well, that's fine. That usually just means that someone is familiar with and acknowledges the problem of solipsism.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
what you
all it
mean?
means,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's what
me
I
too.
mean.
Me too. I'd bring it up all the time in conversations because it's such a useful thought experiment, and the fact that it is a real world part of what we have to deal with in terms of these questions makes it all the more, salient, um, for what it's useful for. But again,
Hmm.
I said the other day, I think on your stream, that what I think we lack is any reason to think solipsism is true, right? The fact that we can't
Hmm.
disprove it doesn't doesn't point towards it being true.
Right.
Um,
That's true.
and then the thing that I think points to the existence of an external world is just the seemingness of it being external, which of course is the thing that if solipsism was true would be totally misleading to me. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So but it still kind of leaves you in that position of going, okay, well, I have a reason to lean this way and not any reason to lean in the other way. Um, and so you go with it, right? But
Right. Right.
but as you said, I mean, the question of experience is the step before that question of solipsism, isn't it?
Yep. Absolutely. It's the foundation problem. That's the thing. And it's so hard to convey. And and then that's why we get into these other inferences like, modeling, like idealism, materialism, panpsychism, all the things you kind of brought up, which kind of spring off of that. And that's where the uncertainty, you could say, and all we can really do is just do a comparative analysis of metaphysics. Like we can say, well, which one seems to be more explanatory, internally coherent, parsimonious, um, which one seems to allow for the less amount of assumptions. But those parts are, and I always say this, that those things I'm not certain about. I only lean towards those things. I always try to make sure I say that because it's easy to mislead people and say you're kind of overstating your position by saying, "Oh, I know idealism is the case," or "I know materialism is the case," or what have you. I think that's an overstatement, and I think even any scientist worth his weight is even going to say that my modeling isn't certain or any modeling is not certain. We just have, we have to define an axiom and work within that framing. And if you accept the framing, we can have a reasonable conversation. But if we can't really rely on the axioms that we've outlined, then it's going to land in different places. We have different starting points. We're always going to end up in different places, right? But I think that
Yeah, yeah,
what everyone can agree on is that we think, therefore we are. I mean, most people I've ever spoken to, even you know, um, atheists or skeptics or religious people or what have you, everybody knows that that's foundational. Now, a presuppositionalist, however, his mistake, as you clearly pointed out, is that his presuppositions are based on inferences which are unreliable. So, like the idea of God or Jesus or whatever, whoever your God is just based on your culture, your beliefs, your framing. And they will not acknowledge that really their epistemic base is the fact that they experience anything at all, and they experience any thought at all. That's really their basis, and that's why I reject those sort of approaches. I could eat,
mhm.
anybody can be a Christian for a host of reasons, but that's one of the bad reasons. I would say one of the worst is that presuppositional thing, because
Yeah. I
it's
don't think
just
much
a
of that either.
denial. Yeah, it's a denial of the true foundation that we all can
Yeah,
agree on.
yeah.
But I
Well,
think
and to
we've
circle back to what
yeah, go
what you
right
had
ahead.
said right before that, about scientists will say, well, we don't know, we're not certain, all this kind of thing, and kind of that's what I'm saying is that like I think we just unfortunately operate
Hmm.
with without having absolute certainty in anything. And so what we operate in is like a gradient of things we're more or less certain on, and there are some things that deserve to be pretty high up there. and that's where we're agreeing. But the question is whether pretty high up there, or as like maximally certain, whether that qualifies as absolute certainty, or whether it's even like healthy for thought and belief to consider it absolute, instead of saying no matter how high it is, I could still be wrong. Um, and I think we've kind of talked about what that would entail. But
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying 100% here. Like, I could easily just, and possibly I could, argue it that way. But if you were just to ask me genuinely, if someone, because I always answer genuinely. I don't want to answer in a way the textbooks tell me I should, answer these sort of things, right?
hmm
So, like, if you ask me, are you certain 100% that you believe that it's true that consciousness or your awareness cannot be doubted? If you were to just ask me that, I would say I would have to be honest and say yes. And like I said in the remarks from earlier this morning, like, it's not that I necessarily saying you're necessarily wrong about that. Um, for your opinion, I can't speak for you, but I just haven't heard anything that should move me to concede that, yeah, I can doubt my experience. I can kind of maybe see that I'm really not experiencing, or I just think I am, you know? Like, it's like
well,
how much
no.
shrooms would you
Remember
have to
that's not the
smoke?
remember that's
But
not what
yeah,
remember that's not what I'm arguing that you
right,
ought
right,
to
right.
think is the case.
Right, right, right,
What
right.
I'm
I
what I'm
understand.
arguing is whether or not the certainty that you have in it ought to be absolute or not.
That's what I'm
And
saying. That's what I'm
and
saying.
you had said, hey, when someone asks me, I just, I'll say how I feel honestly, and I'll say I'm 100% certain about this. And I'm thinking, like, speaking of like linguistic and cultural baggage that we can't really get away from, is the way that people are so comfortable saying, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, I'm sure, oh yeah, I'm certain, oh it's
Hmm.
definitely true about all kinds of things that
Hmm.
if we
Hmm.
got into and dug into, they'd have to say, well, I could be wrong this way, or I could be wrong that way. And then we wouldn't be talking about weird stuff like somehow you don't exist, even though it seems like there's no way that could be, right? Then we're just talking about things that are just counter to what someone thought or was certain of, but they still say it that way. And
Hmm.
I think,
Hmm.
like, if what you're saying is no, 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 I'm not just saying it, I really think this certainty is absolute. I feel that, deep in my in my feelings. Then
Hmm.
you know, I'm not going to tell you you don't feel that way, but
Right, right, right,
I'm
right.
just going to say from where I'm standing, it
It's
doesn't
not
look like it
convincing.
could be justified. It can't be reasonable to be absolutely certain, no matter how confident you feel about something.
Yep.
But
I can understand what you're saying there. I just a lot of these type of things I don't really know. I don't really bother because there's a lot of people that seriously have that thought. Like I've had long debates with folks that say no, you like, especially religious people mainly, that'll tell me no, you can't be certain at all that you're having a conscious experience because you could be a brain in the vat. And it's like,
yeah,
but
yeah,
even if I was a brain in the vat, I would still be experiencing being a brain in the vat, maybe not knowing I'm in a vat, but
yeah,
it's almost like a conflation between the contents and the foundation itself, where the
yeah.
contents rely on.
It's a
Yeah.
naive way to respond to the problem of solipsism.
Right, right, right. Exactly, exactly. So it's not an easy when you dig deep to it, like what you're really getting at, Joel, and you're a very smart person and a very intelligent person to really recognize that. Like you've really put a lot of thought into that idea. That's why I really want to have the conversation live because it's so easy to talk past each other on text and it's real easy to assume maybe you're just making the case as the religious people, just in maybe different clever words, and you can never really understand that way. Or maybe you could vice versa. You could think maybe I'm, appealing to some kind of supernatural kind of ideal, right? But and you may still think that. I don't know, but at least
Well,
we have
no.
the opportunity to sort of air it out.
Yeah, and I want to return thank you for the kind words, and I send it right back to you. I love it that you guys think about these things and talk about these things, and you do it with some openness to having some critical thought applied to it, and I it's something I enjoy, and so just kind
It's
of thrilled to
relaxing.
be
I love
included.
it. Exactly. I love these sort of conversations. In fact, I don't know how much time you have. I could post up a link to see if maybe someone else wants to join in, maybe ask one of us questions or not. I don't know if you're up to anything like that, but I can do
Um,
that. Um,
I mean,
if
sure,
not, I'm kind of out
if
of
you think
gas on
anybody
this
is
one.
interested, I can't tell
Yeah,
whether there's
I
even
don't know.
anybody there.
Right. I'll just put it out there in case there's like three people out there. Maybe somebody wants to jump in. I'll see. If not, I'm gonna end the call soon, just 'cause I got to take care of a few things. But I do have a few minutes, but I did want to give someone an opportunity to jump in
Okay,
if
yeah,
they'd like. We'll see.
sure,
Let's see
sure.
if anybody
Yeah, and I
responds.
mean, I do think we covered it pretty good.
Yeah, real good conversation, man. This is a good one. And these are the kind of conversations I want to have, something more deep with substance, instead of
hmm hmm
like arguing whether God's true or not. Those kind of things are, I mean, they're
hmm
fun. They're, of course, they're a lot of fun, going playing chess with people on things like that. But this
Oh
one's a
yeah, I
real
like
good
that
one.
one too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But oh, I did want to kind of specify because you had said something about did I think idealism is necessarily supernatural, and I know I kind of made that comparison earlier. What
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to say that I think it qualifies as supernatural as categorized. What I'm saying is that it feels like it's a similar attempt to explain things that people do when they posit something supernatural.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the similarity that I see. Not that
Gotcha.
a greater mind necessarily has to be, something supernatural.
Yeah. I just don't like I just don't understand the word. It's not that I'm opposed to the word supernatural necessarily. I just
hmm
don't really know what people mean when they say it. Like some people will tell you that in their mind quantum mechanics is supernatural. Why? Because it's not something we can easily understand. It doesn't the rules of quantum mechanics don't apply to the rules of everyday life in the classical world, right? And so they kind of
Sure.
classify quantum mechanics, but I don't see it that way. I don't
Yeah.
see the because as a non-dualist, I just see everything as the same field of whatever of reality. Reality
Right.
is we're the ones who cipher things out. And
You
it's
know what
for
that
good
seems
reasons.
what that seems like to me is that this idea that like when we see something that we can't understand, that's supernatural. That's a little more of a
Right.
description of how people have come up with supernatural explanations is they saw something they couldn't understand and then they posited something supernatural behind it. um but it doesn't it doesn't really work well for a category of anything because it's just kind of like we might understand something that's uh, we might not understand something that's natural, and it doesn't become
Mm-hmm.
natural when we gain that understanding of it. um,
Right. There
but
you go.
but yeah, I'm
Bingo.
with you. The
Right.
term supernatural is weird because it's almost like saying something's not natural, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then if you go and you go, well, what are you saying when you how do we know when something's natural? Well, that was also kind of a term and a category that was rooted in the idea that God creates things with nature, like He created you with your nature, human nature, the nature of this animal. It just means like how it was created to be.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right. It
so
just yeah. Hmm.
all these terms, even natural, and which there's plenty of people who would just be like, I'm a naturalist, but it's kind of like you're saying you were made that way by God. It's like a weird term.
Yeah,
Um, I know
yeah,
people don't mean it that way, but I'm saying that's kind of the root of it. And so when you dig into it, it's like, what are we even saying here?
right. And with that lack of clarity, it just makes it's just hard for me to wrap the way that my brain works. I have to understand like I want to make sure I understand what we're talking about, when we move forward so I can build on things. Otherwise, we're going to
Hmm.
end up talking past each other again, and
Hmm.
not good. Well, it looks like it's empty out there, so what I'm going to do is
Yeah,
I'm going to
man,
go ahead and
that's
check
cool.
on my stuff here and yeah.
Yeah,
That was a
man.
great
Thanks again, Scott.
conversation, Joel. Thank you so much, man, for doing it with me, man.
Absolutely. Well, I know we'll talk again soon.
You got them. We'll come up with something else to argue about.
Oh yeah. Hey, we got a list.
Yes, we'll pick something up by next week.
Pick the most
All right, brother.
parsimonious
I'm
one, and
out,
we'll
man.
start there.
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right, brother.
All right, man. You have a good one, man.
You too. Later.
All right.